Hello, class. Good morning. Welcome to another day, another topic on unpacking the self. So last time we discussed about the physical self, by which we had discussed the different ways on how to take care of the physical self, the different concepts or terminologies related to the physical self. So this time we are done with the physical self, and now let's move to another topic, which is on the sexual self. Okay, so the sexual self topic is divided into four. First, we have the biological sex. The second one is on the gender and sexual orientation. We also have the sexual behavior, and the fourth one is on the sexually transmitted diseases. As of this time, we are going to talk about the biological sex. But before that, let us have a brief overview with the sexual self. What do you mean by sexual self? So sexual self is a complex set of schemas that allow us to understand and express ourselves as sexual beings. What does it mean? So from the root word of the term sexual, it means sex. So when we say sex, um, it refers to the characteristics which defines or which differentiates man from a woman. Okay, so when we say schema, these are set of experiences. Okay, so that is registered into your mind. So the way how we express, meaning to say the way how we express ourselves, how we understand ourselves in reference to our sexuality, our experiences has something to do with that. Okay, so there is a relationship between our experiences and the way how we express ourselves in terms of the in terms of our sex or our gender preference. Okay, so we hold schemas that pertain to our sex, gender, sexual orientation, and the sexual expression or responses. Okay, so we are going to define these four terms, not that specifically because we are going to talk about it later. Okay, so let's define first sex. So sex refers to the biological and physiological characteristics that define men and women and sex categories of male and female. So sex, what makes you a man, what makes you a woman. Okay, so mostly it is based on the reproductive organs that you have, with external organs that you have, as well as the and it is supported by the secondary sex characteristics. Okay, so it is the biological or the assigned sex at birth. Okay, so could it be male and female? Are you a man or a woman? Okay, so that refers to sex, whereas gender re- refers to the attitudes, feelings, and behaviors that a given culture associates with a person's biological sex. So when we say attitude, feelings, and behaviors, it may be in congruence with your assigned sex, or could it be um, in contrast with. Okay, so lahi ang imuhang gender expression compared to your assigned sex. And we are going to talk about it on the next topic. Next is on gender identity. It is the internal awareness of where the individual belongs in the feminine and masculine categories. Okay, so there are different sexual uh, gender identity that we are going to discuss in the next topic, not in the biological sex, but in the gender and sexual orientation topic. Would be gender queer, excuse me. Could it be gender queer, gender variant, gender fluid? Okay, so these are some of the different gender categories Okay, so or the terminologies that is related to gender identity. Next is on sexual orientation. Okay, so when we say sexual orientation, it refers to one's sexual and romantic interest. So, musod na ana si sexual and romantic interest when we say sexual orientation. Could it be you are a heterosexual, homosexual, or a bisexual? So, this time, let's dive in and explore the topic on the biological sex. So, when we say biological sex, again, this is the sex that is assigned at birth. How are you formed? How is this formed? Okay, so hindi sura ba na diha og tubo ang mga external organs or does it undergo a certain process? Okay? So, let's talk about sex chromosomes. Okay, so maybe you have um encountered this topic when you were in junior high school or could it be in senior high school? The sex chromosomes. Okay, so our biological sex begins with the sex chromosomes we inherit from our parents during fertilization. Okay, so that is the fusion of the sex cells of our parents. So nag-fuse si egg and si sperm cells. Okay, so your mother's egg cells is composed of, or that is the sex chromosome assigned to a mother's egg cells is the X chromosomes, whereas for the father's sperm cells, that is half an X chromosome, while the other half have a Y chromosomes. Okay, so division. Okay, so it's the father's sperm cells help which will help identify if the the sex that will be assigned to a certain baby is a girl or a boy. So during fertilization, the X of the mother's egg cells paired with the X chromosome of the father's sperm cells that is equivalent to a girl. So the baby that will be produced is a girl, whereas XY pair of chromosomes would produce a boy. Okay? So that is how chromosomes are paired in order to produce a boy or a girl. Okay? So next to that, okay. So let's move to the sexual development. Okay, so sexual development, there are important stages which distinctly define the development of our biological sex. Okay, so how is it developed? Okay, unsa man na pag-develop? Diretso ba na siya ingana na largo og porma or does it have uh, a certain process in order to produce such external organs? Okay, so we have the prenatal stage and the pubertal stage. So during the prenatal stage, that is uh, where the gonads, the internal organs, and the external genitalia are formed. Okay, so in the prenatal stage, it has something to do with um, before birth. Okay, so the process was before birth. Okay, so whereas on the pubertal stage, that could be somewhat in the age of 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15, by which secondary sex characteristics develop. So, dito na itong, uh, you, for boys, their voice would be deeper compared to their usual voice, okay, when they were at the age of 5 to 10, okay? So, broadening of hips for girls, those are secondary sex characteristics, okay? So let's go over with the prenatal stage first. Okay, so gonads. Okay, so at first, during the first 6 weeks after fertilization, so probably that would be a month or two. Okay, so dili ra pud kabutog to a month and a half, by which embryos embryos have identical primordial gonads. Okay, so primordial meaning existing at the beginning. So the identical pair of gonadal structures consist of an outer covering or cortex that has a potential to become an ovary and an inner core of medulla which has also the potential to become a testis. So during that first 6 weeks after fertilization, dili pa ma-identify ang sex anak nga baby. Okay, so because there are two identical primordial gonads. Okay, so these primordial gonads would then develop into either an ovary or a testis. Okay, so murag na pa na siya sa stage nga depende kung kinsay makauna. Okay, so is it a girl or a boy? So there is an SRY gene. Okay, so this is a gene. What is this SRY gene? Okay, so SRY gene is okay. So from SRY, this is the acronym for sex determining region of the Y chromosome of the male embryos. Okay, so at about 6 weeks after conception, the SRY gene triggers the synthesis of the SRY protein. Okay, so by which this protein, okay, so gamit ni siya nga protein in order for the gonads to develop into a testis. Okay, so this SRY protein is present in the male embryo. Okay, so whereas for the lack of SRY protein, if that primordial gonads lack the SRY protein, it will automatically develop into ovaries. So meaning, ang iyahang ma-develop would probably be a girl. Okay? Probably because there are some abnormalities in sexual development. Okay? Next is okay, so that is on the gonads. Next is on the internal organs. Okay, so go from gonads to the internal organs to the external organs. Okay, so the external organs, what we could see now. Okay, so in our body. Okay, so internal organs, these are inside our external organ. Okay, so before the third month of the prenatal development, both embryos possess the same reproductive ducts, including a male Wolffian and a female Mullerian system. Okay, so still these embryos possess the same reproductive ducts. So dili pa gyapon ma-identify into a male or female during the third month. It's because nagsige pa gyapon siya process. Okay, so process into either a boy or a girl reproductive organs. Okay, so there are these two systems. For the male, it's the Wolffian, and for the female, it's the Mullerian system. Okay, so the Wolffian system can potentially develop into the reproductive ducts comprising the epididymis, vas deferens, the ejaculatory duct, and and the seminal vesicles. Okay, so this internal organs are for male. Okay, so the Wolffian system will help develop the reproductive ducts into internal organs for male. Okay, so that is for the Wolffian system. Whereas for the Mullerian system, it can form into the fallopian tubes, the uterus, and the upper portion of the vagina. Okay, so these are the two systems which would help develop into either internal organs for men or internal organs for women. The Wolffian system and the Mullerian system. Okay, so in the third month, the male's newly developed testes begin to secrete two hormones. Okay, so and these two hormones are these are for male. Okay, so these hormones would help the Wolffian system to develop its internal organs. So you are if ang pairing niya is XY, which is for boys, diba? XY. Okay, let me see. So XY. Okay, so ang chromosome niya is XY, so probably that would be a boy. Okay, so and with that, after the gonads would form into a testis. Okay, so mosekret na pud siya og two hormones. Okay, so these two hormones would help the Wolffian system to develop its internal organs. Okay, so what are these two hormones? We have the testosterone and the anti-Mullerian hormones. So anti-Mullerian. So pang kuan siya, pang anti siya with the Mullerian system with the Mullerian system for female. Okay, so this testosterone, a common type of androgen hormones, stimulates the Wolffian system's development. So ning tabang siya, it would help the Wolffian system to develop into an internal organs for male. Next is the anti-Mullerian hormones, which would prevent the development of the Mullerian system. Okay, so there are two hormones which helps develop the internal organs, which would help the Wolffian system develop its internal organs. So starting from the gonads, starting from the primordial gonads, that would that would develop into a testis that is for the XY sa boy. So develop siya into a testis, and then this testis would produce hormones sa testosterone and the anti-Mullerian hormones nga mo siya motabang para ma-develop tong internal organs for male. Okay, so for the female, so si XX chromosome from the primordial gonads, mo develop siya og ovary. Okay, so si ovary, which would ang pautana, the question is, si ovary, na ba siya i-secrete nga hormones which would help develop the Mullerian system? Okay, so the answer to that question is, it doesn't require any hormone at all. So, dili mo secrete og hormones si ovary. Okay, so unlike with the testis nga mo secrete siya og testosterone og si anti-Mullerian hormones, which would help develop the Wolffian system. Okay, so from the gonads to the ovary to the Mullerian system, okay, so ang pag-develop niya into fallopian tubes, uterus, and the upper portion of the vagina doesn't require any hormone at all. So kaya ra niya mo form into this internal organs. So muna say capacity for kuan for the female. ovaries. Okay? So we are done with the internal organs. So from the gonads to the internal organs. Next is the external organs. So the organs, the reproductive organs that we could see in our body. Okay, so at 6 weeks, how is it developed? At 6 weeks after fertilization, the external reproductive organs of both males and females begin to differentiate from the same four parts. Okay, so the glands, the urethral folds, the lateral bodies, and the labioscrotal swellings. So sasagianan sa ihi. Okay, so to the formation of that external organs that you have, whether you are a boy or a girl. Okay, so that is developed at 6 weeks after fertilization. Okay, so si glands would be developed into the head of the penis for male and clitoris in the female. Okay, so the urethral folds, gianan sa ihi, would fuse in the male while becoming enlarged as labia minora in the female. Next to that is the lateral bodies. Okay, so for the shaft of the penis for male, and it will become hood of the clitoris in the female. For the labioscrotal swellings, it forms the scrotum in the male or the labia majora in the female. So if you want to research more on this topic, if you want to have a concrete picture, a clear picture about this topic, you can research. You can do your research. Okay? So that is on the development of that is on the prenatal stage by which the gonads, the internal and external organs were developed. Okay? So if you have questions, since it's a recorded video, you can ask it on the messenger, on the group chat, or have more research on the internet if you are not yet satisfied with the discussion. Okay? So after the prenatal stage, what's next? Okay, so next to that, we have the pubertal stage. Okay, so during puberty. Okay, so during the pubertal stage, it leads to the development of the secondary sex characteristics. Okay, so as children transition into adulthood, they pass puberty, characterized by adolescent growth spurt, maturity of the external genitalia, and the development of secondary sex characteristics. So why is it that there is a sudden growth with, especially for boys, for male? Okay, so the anterior pituitary releases high growth hormone levels that act directly on the bones and muscle tissues, resulting in a growth spurt. Okay, so it is the anterior pituitary which is responsible for that. Okay, so which is responsible for releasing growth hormones. So eventually, if you are not yet, if you do not achieve the growth for pubertal stage at this very moment, okay, so probably it's your anterior pituitary is not functioning. Okay, so next to that, the hypothalamus releases the gonadotropin releasing hormone or GnRH that stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to release two gonadotropic hormones. Okay, so by the way, disclaimer, I forgot. Okay, so the ones discussed are just based on the book. I am not a science major who is capable more on explaining deeper the different terminologies, but I am just basing it on what is on the book. So based on my understanding on what is on the book. Okay? So It stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to release two gonadotropic hormones. So it is the hypothalamus which would help the anterior pituitary gland to release gonadotropic hormones. The follicle stimulating hormone, or the FSH, and the luteinizing hormone, or the LH. Okay, so in males, okay, so these two hormones, FSH and LH, gonadotropin releasing hormone, no, not the gonadotropin, but it's the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone. Okay, so this cause the testes to release, excuse me, to release testosterone. Okay, so and we all know that testosterone, these are androgen hormone which is necessary for male. Okay, so for females, they stimulate the ovaries to produce estradiol. Okay, so the most common type of estrogen. Okay, so uh, this FSH and LH, these are both present in male and females. Okay, so not necessarily sa males and females, however, their effects is different between the two. Okay, so um for male, it causes the testes to release testosterone. Then for female, it causes the ovary to produce estradiol. Okay, testosterone, androgen, estradiol is estrogen. Okay, so always remember that pairing for male and female. And also, the testes also produce estradiol, but in low amounts. Similarly, the ovaries release androgens, including testosterone, in small amounts. So gagmay lang because these are not needed for the estradiol is not needed for male, whereas the testosterone is not needed for female. So only a small amount. It's because siguro it's because of the presence of the FSH and the LH in both male and female. Okay? So the higher the levels of androgen, the testosterone, than estrogen, the more masculinization occurs. Okay, so if there are a lot of androgen in your body, okay, so that's the time that you are more masculine. Okay, so whereas the more abundant amount of estrogen than androgen, it results in feminization. Okay, so for the higher levels of androgen than estrogen, the more masculinization occurs. Okay, so it leads to the transformations for male, including the development of muscle mass and strength, broadening of shoulders and chest, the growth of facial and body hair, including the underarm, the abdomen, the chest, the pubic area, the enlargement of the larynx, and the deepening of your voice. Okay, so those are the secondary sex characteristics for male. Okay, so and that is because of the androgen present. The more androgen, the higher level of androgen present in the body. Okay, so for feminization, which has abundant amount of estrogen. Okay, so in females, the typical changes, the typical secondary sex characteristics includes enlargement of breast, changes in fat distribution and quantity. Okay, so ano yung mga bilbil. Okay, so widening of the hips, ang batang mo, sugod nagkadako, growth of body hair in the underarm and pubic area, and the maturity of the uterus. So ready for conception na. Okay, so ready na sudlan og bata. Okay? So, again, those are the different stages. Okay? So, stages in sexual development. Okay? So, how were your assigned sex was developed? Okay? So, nagdiretso ra ba na largo o guwa? No, it doesn't. But it undergoes stages from the gonads to the internal organs to the external organs to the development of the secondary sex characteristics. Okay? So if you have questions, you can just go back with the video, or if you do not understand, if the picture is not yet clear, you can review the video. Okay? So, sad to note that there are some abnormalities in sexual development. Okay, so sad lang yun because there are some who has its abnormal nga uh, organs. Could it be internal or external organs gonna develop? Okay, first we have the androgen insensitivity syndrome. Okay, so androgen for boys, insensitivity, so lack of androgen syndrome. Okay, so individuals with AIS have an XY genotype but develop a female appearance. Okay, so kaning excuse me, those who have this AIS have an XY genotype but develop a female appearance. So lahi ang sa iyang chromosome that is for boy pero ang iyang appearance is for girl. Okay, so in the case of AIS, there is a mutation in the androgen receptors such that they become unresponsive or it is as if no androgens are released. Okay, so hmm, um, the non-reactivity to androgen prevents the development of the Wolffian system, which is an antecedent of the male internal organs. So, because the anti-Mullerian hormone usually functions, the internal reproductive system does not does not fully develop, okay, resulting in a shallow vagina with no uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. Kay naglibog man siya because that is an XY genotype that is for boys. That is for male. Pero, kung maning function iyahang androgen receptors. So, unsa may mutabang ni Wolffian system pag-develop kung dili siya mo produce og androgen. Okay? So, in that case, okay, so ang kasagaran mahitabo, it would result in a shallow vagina with no uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. So, ingana ang mahitabo. Okay? So, next to that is the androgenital syndrome. Okay, so kani si androgenital syndrome, this is a heritable condition with increased levels of androgen. So, bae siya, but then, daghan siya og androgen. Okay, so develop ambiguous external genitalia such as an enlarged clitoris and fused labia, and in some cases, no vaginal opening. So, kuyaw siya si androgenital syndrome. Okay, so si androgenital syndrome, iyang sex could probably be a girl. Okay, so female But because of the increased levels of androgens, which is not necessary for female, okay, so naglibog na there is an ambiguous external genitalia, okay, so such as an enlarged clitoris and fused labia and in some cases no vaginal opening. In this case, siguro makaya niyo og surgery or if wala ka surgery, okay, so worst comes to worst, probably dili siya mabuhi. Okay? So with those with androgenital syndrome, their behavior is also affected, by which they display tomboyishness, engage more in male-related activities, and are more likely engaged in bisexual and lesbian behavior. Okay? So that is with the and individuals with androgenital syndrome. Next, and abnormality is the 5-alpha reductase deficiency. Okay, so individuals born with this condition have a deficient enzyme known as the 5-alpha reductase that converts testosterone into 5-alpha dehydrotestosterone, which is responsible for the masculinization of the external organs of the fetus. Okay, so those with this condition have ambiguous external genitals, and are commonly raised as girls. Okay, so at puberty, increased levels of testosterone leads to the development of male secondary sex characteristics. So it's ambiguous. Okay, so maglibog gihapon. So maglibog gihapon na ang lawas kung sa yung i-develop because there are some deficiency. Okay, so naay mga kakuwangan. Okay, so deficiency in the 5-alpha dehydrotestosterone responsible for the masculinization of the external organs of the fetus. Okay, so that's on the abnormalities in the sexual development. Okay, so let's proceed with the case of John. So I will narrate the case of John. So the case of John or Bruce Peter Remier in real life created one of the most significant controversies about the effects of nature and nurture on one's sexual identity. Okay, so when we say nature, that's his or her natural development. When we say nurture, their environment has something to do with the nurture. Okay, so his life has been the subject of many books, documentaries, and TV shows. Okay, so Bruce was born a biological male. So he was born as a biological male. However, his penis was irreparably damaged during the circumcision. So pagtuli niya, na-damage ang iyahang penis. So upon the advice of an expert known as John Money, Bruce's parents decided to raise him as a girl. Okay, so Bruce underwent a surgery in which artificial vagina was created. Okay, so without Bruce's permission, wag ilahan ang gibut-butan nga ipa-undergo surgery si Bruce or John. Okay, so artificial vagina was created. He was also given female hormones during puberty. So after reassignment, Bruce was given the name Brenda. Since infancy, Bruce and his twin brother, Brian, regularly visited Manny and were unknowingly the subjects of Manny's experiments. Manny's academic works endorse the theory that gender is a social construct and fluid, particularly early in life. So Manny wants to prove that gender could be constructed socially. So dili siya gyud nguna kung your assigned sex at birth is for male na gyud imong gender. Okay, so but there is something like a social construct and fluid. So his works justify the sex reassignment surgeries of thousands of children born with abnormal genitals. Okay, so John Money, had provided the public with a very interesting report about John or Joanne, the pseudonym he used for Bruce or Brenda. Okay, so partly because of the availability of data on Bruce's twin brother, Brian. Okay, so Manny reported a successful transition for Brenda, describing her as girlish, in contrast to her twin brother's boyishness. So, however, Bruce debunked these claims as an adult and recounted his trauma and anguish. He reported that even as a child, he experienced great distress over his assigned sex, not now known today as gender dysphoria. Okay, so if you are in a traumatic condition about your gender, okay, so you feel great distress that is known as the gender dysphoria. Kung dili nimo kabubuton, okay, nga that is your gender identity, that is your gender expression. Okay? So although he grew up programmed as a girl engaging in girls' activities and interests and was subjected to an estrogen regimen by age of 12, he had never identified himself as a girl. He resented the changes in the body, like development of his breast. At 13, he threatened to commit suicide if his parents would force him to go to money for their annual visit. At 15, his father revealed to him his medical history. Immediately afterward, he assumed a male identity, renaming himself as David. So he then began male hormone therapy and underwent surgery to remove his breast and reconstruct a penis. He subsequently married. So later, Bruce participated in the study of Manny's academic rival Milton Diamond and began speaking publicly about his experience with sex reassignment. He even collaborated on writing his biography to save others through his life story. However, David, who had experienced depression for most of his life, took his life on May 4, 2004, days after his wife asked for a divorce. So, what is the implication of Bruce's case for for children born with abnormal genitals? Okay, so in the case of John, Joanne, Bruce, or Brenda, or David. Okay, so there are a lot of names associated to Bruce. Okay, so with that, with that case of John, okay, so it doesn't mean, it implies that our gender expression, okay, so our gender identity must be in accordance with our will. Okay, so dili siya ingon ana nga if your parents want you to have this gender identity, then that would be your identity. Okay, so you have your own decision making in terms of your gender identity, in terms of your sexual expression. So even though you have abnormalities in sexual development, but still, it's your choice. Okay, so it's still a choice that you should make, and the choice must be yours. Say not others' choice, but it must be your choice. Okay, so that is on the case of John. Okay, so in reference to gender and sexual expression orientation, that is our next topic. So the next topic would be presented on the next video. Okay, so thank you so much for listening to our discussion about the biological sex. Okay, so if you have questions, you can ask me or you can search it on the internet. Okay, so thank you so much, and let's proceed to the next video. Have a good day.